There we go. Right. Good morning, everyone. Back to Sanhedrin. If we get to it today, which I think we probably might, we're going to go to what I promised Michael last week, his favorite book. So you might want to go and get it ready, Michael. And also, I am going to prove to you today, or maybe not today, maybe next week, but I'm going to prove to you in the next week or two my theory that all the numbers given in these various places are not to be taken literally. There is a brilliant example coming up in this piece of Gemarah, and I'm very excited to share it with you. But you'll just have to hang on because we're not quite there yet. So where are we? We are talking about a Jewish king. We're talking about the Gemarah's detailed explanation of Parashat HaMelech, the king, the parasha of the king, the parasha that tells us all about what the king can and can't do, and it comes from Parashat Shoftim, and it's chapter 17 of Devarim, and I'm going to share the screen with you right away so that you can see it. There we go. So this is the pasuk that we're talking about. The king shall not take many wives for himself. We've discussed that already. And his heart must not turn away. And he shall not acquire much silver and gold for himself. The kesef, the zahav, lo yarbe lo ma'od. Silver and gold he should not increase for himself very much, literally translated. That is the pasuk that the Gemarah is now going to concern itself with. So I'll switch to the Gemarah now. And I'm assuming you can see that now, the Gemarah, yes?
Yep.
Yeah, it's page 125 in the Steinsaltz, page 21b, and it's little number 2 if you're in an art scroll, and it's on the screen for you. The kesef v'zahav lo yarbe lo. The Gemarah, first of all, quotes the Mishnah, which quotes the pasuk that we've just read.
But there's no mirror.
Let me just mute everybody so we don't get feedback. If you want to speak, just unmute, but I'm going to mute everybody so that I don't get feedback in my ear. There we go. Right. So, neither shall he greatly accumulate silver and gold for himself. Now, don't read the note over here, because that will spoil it. We will get to it in a minute. So the Gemarah then goes on to say, Ella kedei litain aspania. Aspania. And only enough to provide or to give aspania. Now, what kind of language does that sound like to you? It's not Hebrew.
Spanish.
Maybe that was just the way I said it. But I mean, Spanish is based on this language, yes.
Latin.
Aramaic.
Latin. It's Latin. Osponion is a Latin word. And it means, I think originally from the Greek, but Latin adopted it. And it means provisions, specifically for soldiers. Now, I thought that the word sounded a bit familiar to me, and I tried to find an English word which is from the root of osponon, and actually there is one, and I don't know where I've read it. I found it in the Oxford Dictionary. It's osponion means either means two things. It can either mean provisions for soldiers, like rations, that's the word, which is what it means here. But it also has been adopted in the scientific world, which is where I think I must have heard it, because it is a word that is used to describe certain substrates. Who knows what a substrate is? Any scientists? No scientists. A substrate is what you put on one. You remember when you were at school and you had those round agar jelly plates and you were trying to grow bacteria? Yeah. And then you were going to see which bit of antibiotic killed them. You must have done that in biology at school. Yeah. We all did those little agar plates, and you put your finger on it and you grew all sorts of bugs when you put it in the incubator. No?
No.
Never did that at school? No. Oh, okay. Well, you obviously didn't go to the right school. I bet Avril did. Avril, when you went to school, did you do experiments in science where you put your finger on an agar plate to see what bacteria it grew? Bet you did. Anyway, she's frozen, so she can't tell us. Anyway, I did. And what happens is you get this agar plate, which is like a jelly plate, and you put your finger on it and you grow all sorts of bacteria. You stick it in a incubator and you get all sorts of bacteria growing. And that's to show you how dirty your hands are. And what they used to do was they would make you wash your hands with antibacterial soap, do it again, and see how well you had washed your hands. And inevitably, there were always still some bacteria on them. Anyway, a substrate is the stuff that's in the agar jelly that feeds the bacteria. So when you try and grow bacteria in the lab, and they still do this today, if you take a swab of your throat, if you've got a sore throat and you take a swab of your throat, that swab goes to the lab. Somebody gets that swab out of the thing and swabs it onto one of these plates, sticks it into the incubator, and grows the bugs. So it tells you what bug you've got, and then what antibiotic you need. So they still do it today. Excuse me.
Is it like testing for COVID?
Yeah, same sort of thing. That's a virus, so it's a slightly different process. This is bacteria, but it's a similar idea. You're right. And so the stuff that's on the plate that feeds the bacteria is called opsonion. And I knew I'd heard the word, so that's where it's from. That was a bit long-winded just to tell you a Latin word, but I thought it was interesting. Anyway, so this here word in the Gemara, aspania, comes from the Latin, and it means provisions. Just as our substrate feeds the bacteria, here what the Gemara is saying is the king is only allowed to accumulate enough money to pay the wages and to provide rations for his soldiers. He's not allowed to accumulate huge amount of money for himself. Yachol, says the Gemara, I might have thought, afilu kedei liten Espana. You might have thought, which I think is a ridiculous thought, to be honest. You might have thought that a king is not allowed to accumulate even enough money to pay his soldiers. I don't know why you would think such a thing, because obviously a country that can't pay its soldiers is not going to last very long, because the soldiers are going to revolt. But the Gemara gives what we call a havamina. I might have thought. I might have thought that. Talmud Loma, the pasuk comes to use that word lo for himself to show you lo eino marba. For himself, he's not allowed to increase. In other words, he's not allowed to accumulate personal wealth. Aval marbahu kedei litein Espana. He is allowed to accumulate wealth in order to pay the soldiers and to provide rations for the soldiers. Now, how does a king accumulate wealth to pay for the army and to pay for the rations and to pay for the armaments? How does a king do that?
Taxes.
Taxes.
Taxes, yeah. So, what some Meforshim say is that this is a warning to kings not to do what?
Overtax.
Overtax, yes. Not to raise taxes to an excessive degree. Now, we know from our other discussions, don't we, that there was a particular king that absolutely did that. Who was that, Michael?
Solomon's son, who was king of Judah after Solomon died.
Okay, that is true, but Solomon himself did it.
Yes, he did as well. Yeah.
And then Rechavam did it worse. His son was, Rechavam was told by his advisors, now that you're king, Rechavam, you need to ease off the tax burden. And what did he do?
Increased it.
Increased it. And what happened after that?
The kingdom split.
Kingdom split. So there's a message to Rachel Reeves for if you want to dissolve the union and have Scottish and Welsh and Northern Ireland independence, carry on increasing taxes. Okay, so this is a warning to the king not to overtax the people. Now, what you want as a king is a lean economy, right? You want a lean economy. What does that mean? It means that you have just enough money in your coffers to cover your expenses. But then you could be in problem when something happens. You know, even if you think about your household expenses, if you have enough money just to cover your household expenses, and you just about get through the month, as many people do. Sadly, some people don't even get to the end of the month. But then what happens then when something like what happened to me yesterday occurs? I was in the car park, my car was in the car park of the supermarket. And when I came back out with my trolley, I see that a lorry has backed into my car and made a right mess of it. And driven off without leaving a note, and there are no cameras, and so I have to cough up for it, or at least I have to cough up the excess on my insurance. That was an expense that I was not expecting, and so if I was somebody who just about got through the end of the month, we'd have a real problem. Or if the boiler goes and you have to replace that,
You need a cushion.
You need a cushion. That's exactly the point. You need a contingency. You need a cushion. And that's the next piece of the Gemara over here. Tama de katav Ramachmana lo. This Gemara argues with the Gemara above. The Gemara above said the reason it uses the word lo for himself, he's not allowed to increase for himself, is to tell you that he is allowed to increase for the provisions for the soldiers. The Gemara says, no, that's not quite right. The Gemara says that the Pasuk uses the word lo for him as follows. Halav hachi, if that word lo wasn't there, hava amina, I might have thought. Hava amina, it's a very common Gemara expression, which you need to remember because it comes up over and over again. Hava amina, literally, there is reason amina. What word can you see in there?
Emunah.
Very good, emunah, which means
Belief.
belief. Hava amina, I might have believed, says the Gemara. Afilu kedei litein Spanya namilo. I might have thought that a king was not able to raise taxes even enough to pay the soldiers. As I said, I think that's a rather ridiculous assumption, to be honest. But the Gemara puts it as a hava amina. A hava amina is usually there to be knocked down. I might have thought X, but actually that's wrong and the real thing is why. So when you see Hava Amina, you know that there's going to be a theory put forward which is going to be knocked down. And that's what's going on here. He says, I might have thought that even to provide enough provisions for the soldiers, he's not allowed. Answers the Gemara, lo, that's not the case. Sricha, again, remember last week we spoke about this tiny little comma here, which is not in the big boys Gemara, that if you didn't know it was there, it changes the entire meaning. Because if I say lo sricha, you would tell me that means?
Not necessary.
It is not necessary. And if I put a comma in there and I say lo sricha, what does that mean?
No, but it's necessary.
No, it is necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exact opposite. So that comma changes the meaning completely. And of course, there aren't any commas in the big boys Gemara. And that's why when we're all little boys, we need to have the Steinsaltz or the art scroll to help us out. So, lo, it is needed. Why is it needed? Le haravcha. Haravcha. What does that mean? What word can you see in there?
Revach.
Revach. What does revach mean, Johnny?
Is it not a portion? No.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Where do you know that word from?
Revachamina or something.
Revach v'hatzalah.
That's that, yeah. Revach.
Where do you know that from? Revach v'hatzalah.
Go on.
Yavo mimakom acher. Mordechai says to Esther,
Yeah.
Im hacharesh tacharishi. If you will stay silent now and will not go into the king and ask for mercy for the Jewish people, Revach v'hatzalah. I can't remember the exact words. Help me out, David. Revach v'hatzalah. Yagia mimakom acher. Will arrive, will be. Anyway, Yavo mimakom acher. You're muted, David.
Revach v'hatzalah ya'amod la'Yehudim mimakom
Ya'amod la'Yehudim mimakom acher. Yeah. Ya'amod la'Yehudim mimakom acher v'at uveit avich tovedu. Revach v'hatzalah. Revach v'hatzalah. You know what that means? Hatzalah means saving. That's what hatzalah does. Revach means good things. It's a positive thing. It means safety. It means profit. It means profit. Laharviach in modern Hebrew is to earn. Ani marviach tov means I earn well. Same word, revach. So here we need it, he says, tzricha laharvacha. It means for a profit. He needs it for, what was the word you used, Michael? Cushion. A cushion. Yeah. A cushion, yeah. A cushion or a contingency fund.
A sinking fund, we used to call it. No?
A sinking fund, yeah. So if something goes wrong, you've got something in reserve. So the Gemara says that the word lo there teaches us that he's allowed to accumulate enough money to pay the soldiers and to have stuff in reserve in case something goes wrong, right? So, look at the word, look at the Steinsaltz, Michael. The king is permitted to allow for a liberal appropriation to the military budget so that the army has a comfortable financial cushion. Cushion, exactly as Michael said. There we go. Right. Okay, now then, let's have a look at this little note on the side, which I said don't read earlier on. Some early commentaries explain that the main reason it's prohibited for the king to accumulate silver and gold is to remove the motivation for him to impose increased taxes on the people for the sake of his own wealth, as King Solomon did. Other early commentaries even say that the prohibition applies to silver and gold accumulated through taxes and that is permitted for him to accumulate wealth from other sources. Right, now where would he get his silver and gold from if it wasn't from taxes?
From what?
War and subjugation.
War and what else?
Subjugation of other nations.
Yeah, war and booty and what else? Think about our Prime Minister and his troubles at the moment, his legal troubles.
Yeah, backhanders.
Backhanders.
Yeah.
Yeah, gifts, right? There is a register, apparently, that whenever a politician or somebody in a position of power is given a gift, you have to register that gift in this register so that it's all transparent. So there's no suggestion of impropriety. However, this Gemara seems to imply that kings getting their wealth from elsewhere other than taxes, i.e. gifts or booty, is acceptable. And that's what this Gemara seems to be implying. And we'll see as we go along a little bit more. Let's carry on. Now then, we have just explained the word lo in two different ways. Let's just go back up here. The first lo was horses. He's not allowed to accumulate horses for himself. Lo, lamed vav. How did we explain that? That he wasn't allowed to have a show pony. He wasn't allowed. Remember, we had that really interesting discussion last week, triggered by Jackie's question about whether Mordechai was allowed to ride on this horse or not. And the lo meant that he was not allowed to accumulate for himself a show pony and be a big knacker. The money thing we've just done this morning was a similar explanation of the word lo for himself. He's allowed to accumulate silver and gold, but only for the national coffers, only for paying the soldiers and to have a cushion. Now, we've got another lo in this pasuk. Let's go to the pasuk and have a look. Have a look at verse 17. Velo yarbe lo nashim. He shall not accumulate for himself wives. Now then, how are you going to accommodate that word lo for himself in the same manner as you have accommodated it for the gold and silver and the horses? We said the horses, he's not allowed to have it for himself. It's only for the national protection. Same for the gold and silver. How are you going to get around that with the wives? What, he's only allowed to have wives that will be suitable for the national defense, border seer, and all that stuff? What's going on? What does it mean? It can't mean that, can it?
Spelled differently, isn't it? Spelled differently.
No, it isn't.
Hello, lamed aleph and lamed vav.
Those are two different words. The lo is not yarbe lo for himself. The kesef zahav lo yarbe lo for himself. And horses lo yarbe lo for himself. Exactly the same expression. So if we are being consistent, we need, and you know, Gemara is built on consistency and inconsistency. How are we going to explain that little word lo, meaning for himself, with regard to the women? It doesn't make sense to say it's the same as the gold and silver and the horses, because you don't marry women for the national defense.
You could do.
Ah, okay.
I mean, alliances. They say he can only have 18 wives, but if it's necessary for the national defense, he's got to marry into other nations effectively. Then that could be argued that it's not for himself; it's for the protection of the nation.
Nice, very nice. Okay, that is a good explanation, and one that would fit with the previous explanations of the word lo with regard to the money and the horses. However, that is not what the Gemara says. I happen to think that's what the Gemara should have said, because it would make sense. But the Gemara doesn't say that, and I'll show you what the Gemara does say in a minute. But the Gemara doesn't say that.
Going out. Okay.
Why doesn't it say that, do you think?
Because of the limit on 18 wives, maybe.
Okay, but we could have made that exception. You made a very good case,
Yeah.
Michael, for an exception.
Well, arguing against myself.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, the reason that I think that the Gemara doesn't say that is it doesn't fit the narrative. Because the narrative that we're going to read shortly is about Shlomo HaMelech. And what was one of the big criticisms of Shlomo HaMelech?
Too many wives, too much money, too many horses.
Yeah, all of those things. But let's talk about the wives one, because that's where we're going with this. What was the criticism with regard to his wives, apart from the fact that there were too many of them?
A great distraction.
They were a great distraction. And that's correct.
Idolatry.
That's right. They brought in idolatry, all of those things. And why did he marry those people?
For political alliances.
Yes. So therefore, if we were to allow him to do so, as you were suggesting, Michael, can you see where I'm going with this?
Yep.
If we were going with Michael's suggestion that the word lo for himself with regard to the wives, this one over here, was to mean that he was allowed to have many, many wives with political alliances if he was only doing it for the national good, then it wouldn't fit the narrative at all. It wouldn't fit. It wouldn't actually fit the whole thing, because what we say is that these wives are going to turn his head, and it doesn't matter whether you would marry these wives for your own personal benefit, or you marry the wives for the national good and make alliances, as, by the way, is what happened very, very commonly in history, right up to the 20th and including the early 20th century. I mean, if you look at Queen Victoria's children, they all married into different dynasties for political expediency. This is nothing, it was nothing new in Victoria's time. And this is something which Shlomo HaMelech, I don't think he was the first to do it, and he certainly wasn't the last. But the Torah says you shouldn't do it. Now, that's why, Michael, they can't use the explanation that you gave, which I think is a very good explanation and a consistent explanation. But the Gemara can't use it because it doesn't fit the narrative. Now, I just digress for a second, because this is a problem. When the narrative drives the thought process, we have a problem. We have a problem with, honest is not the word I'm looking for, but we have a problem with I can't think of the word. Integrity, maybe, yes, integrity. And also, we have a problem with the actual truth, because your explanation would have been a fine explanation. It fits with the Gemara's other explanation, but the Gemara chose not to do it because it didn't fit the narrative. Now, I'm sure all of you, probably even, especially maybe even Sharon, because she's American and the American president's weighed in on this. You've all been following the matters pertaining to the BBC in the last few days. And that is exactly what they have been doing. They had a narrative that they wanted to pursue. And anything that didn't fit their narrative was either ignored or changed or distorted. And that seems very clear that that is what has happened. And that is a bad situation. It's a bad situation when you're talking about the BBC, because the BBC is meant to be impartial. It's meant to be a reflection of British values, etc. So it's a real problem when it comes to the BBC. And I think it's a real problem wherever we find it. And the truth is that we all do it. We all do it. It's very difficult not to do it. We have a narrative, and we will either knowingly or unknowingly alter, ignore, stress, distort facts or situations or things that we come across in order to suit our narrative. Another example, there are 200 people apparently trapped in a tunnel in northern Gaza, beyond the yellow line.
It's Rafah, actually, isn't it? In the south.
Beg your pardon, in Rafah. Under the Israelis' control at the moment. The Israelis are describing those 200 people as terrorists, because that's their narrative. They're terrorists. The Turks are describing those 200 people as civilians. How they know that, I have no idea. But that suits their narrative. So there's a distortion of fact going on somewhere along the line, because they can't both be civilians and terrorists. Or can they? That's another question.
Can I just butt in there a second, Johnny, on the point that you just made? A fascinating podcast I was listening to yesterday from one of the recently released hostages, and he makes that exact point, that during the day, they're normal civilians, they're doctors, they're dentists, they're hospital workers, and at night, they're terrorists. Therefore, there's no distinction in Hamas between the terrorist and the civilian. They're one and the same.
Exactly. So that makes this point that I'm making even stronger. So the Turks are calling them civilians because it suits their narrative, because, you know, we have to let them go if they're civilians, because that's, you know, humanitarian. We call them terrorists because that's what we believe they are. That suits our narrative. Now, I'm laboring this point because I think it's important, because we all do it. We all do it on our own individual lives. And I think it's important for us to recognize that it happens. Everybody has an agenda, whether it's the BBC or the Israeli Hasbara or the Turks, whoever it is, we've all got an agenda. And as individuals, I believe that we should try very hard to recognize that we have an agenda, to recognize that we have, we will always have a tendency to look at facts with our own narrative in mind. And we should also therefore be a little savvy and not naive, and look at other people's comments, etc., in the light of their own narrative. But it fascinated me, this, because I had exactly the same thought process as Michael, that would have been a very good explanation of the Gemara. But as we've said, it doesn't suit the Gemara's narrative. Let's have a look what the Gemara actually says now, now that we've made that point clearly. So the Gemara says, where have we gone? Here we go. The Gemara says, Hashta Da'amot lo lidrasha, lo yarbe lo nashim, my darashta be. So that's our question. Now that you've said that term lo means not for himself, it only means for the national interest. How are you going to deal? My darasht be, you can see the word darash, yeah, drasha in there. How are you going to explain? What's a drasha? A drasha is an explanation of something. How are you going to explain that word lo with regard to the nashim, the women? And the Gemara says, this is the answer it gives. A pretty weak answer, to be honest. Le ma'ute hedyotot, to exclude ordinary people, which means only a king is not allowed to have lots of wives. An ordinary person, a hedyot, that is the root, by the way, of the same word, the English word. What English word?
Hedonism.
No. Take away the hey. Replace it with an aleph. Idiot. Yes. What's an idiot?
Fool.
A fool. Yeah. But actually, the original meaning of an idiot was an uneducated person. Okay? An ordinary person.
Don't we have a Cohen hedyot?
Very good. I was just about to say that, Johnny. Excellent. We use the word in English has come to mean it's a pejorative term. It's a term that's not nice. Call somebody an idiot, that's not nice. But the word hedyot means ordinary, actually. So a Kohen hedyot, as Johnny said, is an ordinary Kohen as opposed to
Kohen Gadol.
Kohen Gadol. Every other Kohen who's not a Kohen Gadol is known as a Kohen hedyot. Doesn't mean that he's an idiot, just means he's not the Kohen Gadol. But that is the root of the word. Okay,
Johnny,
so
you don't mind my ignorance, but where does all this come from, having many wives? I thought Torah teaching was you have one wife, and if you don't like the one wife, you can get a divorce from another wife, but not loads and loads of wives. Surely the Torah never teaches us that.
Well, actually, that's not true. This is exactly what this Gemara is saying. This Gemara is saying that, that our pasuk that I've just put back on the screen tells us that the only person who's not allowed to have a lot of wives is the king. And the Gemara is saying exactly the opposite of what you've just said, which is that this is a proof that word lo for the king means to him, i.e. the king. Everybody else, le ma'ute, to exclude, hedyotot, ordinary folk who are not a king, are, according to this Gemara, can marry as many women as he wants. Look at the Steinsaltz, puts a bit of a caveat in it. The Gemara answers that the usage of for himself serves to exclude ordinary people, to specify that only the king is restricted from having many wives, but a civilian may marry as many women as he wants. And here comes the caveat, provided he can support them financially. So, in effect, Jackie, you can marry as many women as you can support financially, which in most people's cases is probably one, but or maybe not even that. So practically speaking, you've got to be able to support them. How do we know that, by the way? How do we know that they've got to be able to support them financially?
It says in the Ketubah, doesn't it?
It does say it in the Ketubah. But why does it say it in the Ketubah?
You've got to support them as in the manner of a Jewish husband to a Jewish wife.
Exactly. It says that in the Ketubah. But why does it say that in the Ketubah? Where does the Ketubah get it from?
Must be from the Torah somewhere.
It must be from the Torah somewhere, and it is, in fact, from the Torah. And I do not know exactly where it is, but David will help me out here. Ona
Mishpatim.
Mishpatim. Okay.
Yeah,
Ona.
the end of Rishon in Mishpatim.
Okay.
Ona,
Thank you.
Kasuta.
Yeah. And the third one. Let's find the exact pasuk. Where do you think it is? Mishpatim, the end of Rishon.
Yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Found it. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking here about a situation of well, I'll see if I can put it on the screen for you. It's chapter 21 of Mishpatim. Let's get it up on the screen. Chapter 21 of Shemot. It's very, very useful having somebody like David who knows every pasuk everywhere to help you out, because I would not have known where to look for this. 21, there we go. And it starts at verse 7. Here we go. And if a man is forced to sell his daughter to be a maidservant, she shall not go free in the manner of other slaves. If she is bad in the eyes of her master, if he's displeasing to her master, master doesn't like her, then he's not allowed to rule over her. La'am nochri lo yimshol. He's not allowed to sell her to another person. Bavigdova, when he betrays her. Ve'im livno yiyadena. And if he gives her to his son, kimishpat banot yasila, he has to treat her like any other daughter-in-law. And here it goes. Im acheret yikach lo. If he takes another wife for himself, and this is the root of the ketubah, by the word, these next few words. She'era kesuta ve'onata lo yigra. Lo yigra means he's not allowed to withhold or be well, how does he hold it? Diminish. Yeah. Lo yigra. There's the Hebrew word garua. What does garua mean in Hebrew?
Divorced.
No, that's grusha. Okay. Garua means worse. Garua means very bad or worse. Okay. So she'era means her sustenance, food. Kesuta, garment. Okay. Va'onata, and marital relations. Lo yigra. He's not allowed to withhold. That is the minimum that a Jewish husband has to provide for his wife. Clothing, sustenance, and marital relations. And that is the basis of the ketubah. That's why it says, Jackie, in the ketubah, that a husband has to provide for his wife as befits a Jewish husband. And that's what this means. It means, and it also goes on in the ketubah. I mean, we all hear the ketubah. It's in Aramaic and nobody ever understands it. And by the way, if you ever go to a wedding and somebody wants to be mechabed you and give you the honor of reading the ketubah, decline. My advice is to decline, because the words are hard and they're tongue twisters. I fell for it once. I'll never fall for it again.
There is a problem with that. There is a problem with that verse, because it talks about if he takes for himself another wife, it doesn't appear to apply to the first wife.
No, what it means is if he takes another wife, he cannot then say, oh, I don't need to do this anymore for this wife because I'm going to do it for the other wife.
I've got a bigger problem, Johnny.
One sec, Jackie, one sec. Let's just deal with this problem first, right? So what he might say This is a hava amina, right? That words that we just said before. What he might say to himself is, okay, I know I've got to provide for a wife. That's what a Jewish husband says. But you know what? I don't like this one anymore. I'm going to take another one. No, you can't then say, I might have thought, right, I've got a new wife. I'll give her the she'ira, kusuta, and onata. I'll give her the sustenance, the clothing, and the marital relations. And the other one can, get lost. No, you can't do that. That's what this pasuk is telling you. If you're going to take another wife, you've got to provide for them as well. And this pasuk is the basis of the caveat that Rav Steinsaltz put in his explanation. Let's just go back to that for a quick second. But a civilian may marry as many women as he wants, provided he can support them financially. Right? The caveat comes from this pasuk. Okay, she'irak suta va'onata, sustenance, clothing, and marital relations. Now, before I come to Jackie, in the ketubah itself, it goes on to say, why did I say don't read it? Because it's all very difficult. But one of the things you'll see if you read it carefully is it says in Aramaic, even to, up to, and including the coat off my shoulders, right? That's where the English expression comes from. Go on, what's the English expression I'm thinking of? She will even take the shirt off my back. Heard that expression, everyone? Yeah. Comes from the ketubah. The ketubah says that a Jewish husband has to give glima me'al tafta, or something like that. The glima is a cloak from off my shoulders. So that's where the expression, the shirt off my back, that's where it comes from. Comes from our ketubah. Yes, Jackie, what's your problem?
Well, in verse 9, it says, if he designates her for his son, how can he, if he's finished with her, how can he then pass her on to his son? That's surely laws of immorality, which go against everything we learn.
Correct. He has not become, this is absolutely right. At this point, she has not become his wife. She's his maidservant, right? He's got a choice. When he has this Jewish maidservant, which has been sold into slavery because the family are poor. I mean, again, there's nothing new with that, is there? Back in the 18th century, even up to the 19th century, even up to the early 20th century, people went into service, didn't they? For the English folk who remember the television program Upstairs, Downstairs, yeah? Downton Abbey is a more modern version of it, right? People were in service because they had no money. That's how they made a living. So if a girl has to go into service, the master has a choice. He either has to treat her nicely, he can marry her, or he can designate her for his son. What this parasha is telling us is that if he chooses to take her as a wife, or if he chooses to give her to his son for a wife, she has to be treated properly like a Jewish wife and not like a slave. Okay, that's what this whole thing is for. But you're absolutely right, Jackie. If he takes her for a wife and that marriage is consummated, then of course he can no longer designate it for his son. That is quite
ambiguous.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back to the Gemara. So our Gemara uses the word lo in terms of the wives, not to allow the king to make political alliances through marriage, but to exclude the individuals from this problem. Now, what have you got to say about that? See if you can think along my warped mind. See what I'm thinking. What am I thinking now?
It's better not to be, if you want loads of wives and marital relations, it's better not to be the king.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Why would you want loads of wives? Well, that's another question. I'll tell you what I'm thinking. I want consistency, don't I? So if we're going to say that the law with regard to the wives comes to exclude a commoner, why don't we say that for the others? Why do we go on and say that what we said about the gold and silver and the horses, which was to exclude his own thing, and it was okay for the national treasures? Why don't we say he's not allowed to accumulate for himself horses? That only applies to a king, and an ordinary person can have many horses as he wants. Why don't we say he's only the fact that he's not allowed to accumulate as much money as he wants only applies to a king, and a commoner can acquire as much gold and silver as he wants? Why don't we say that? And then we wouldn't have all that inconsistency. We would have 3 words exactly the same, lo yarbe lo, and they would all be explained in the same way. So what is the answer to that? Why don't we say that? Any ideas?
As you said before, it doesn't fit the narrative.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is true. We're going to go, as you can see, from the next bit over here, we are going to talk about Shlomo. So there is that narrative which the Gemara is going to come and talk about. So that is true. I wonder if there's any other reasons why the Gemara doesn't use one explanation for all 3. Now, I read something about that this morning, and I've forgotten it. So just give me a sec to reread.
Scroll 20, no, 25.
That's where I read it. Yeah, I knew I'd read it this morning, but I couldn't remember what it said. Let me read it to you to remind myself. Although the prohibition was stated specifically regarding to a king, one might have thought that since the verse explains the reason for the prohibition is that his heart not turn astray from God, it should be applied to commoners as well. The verse therefore specifies that the prohibition only applies to the king. The question arises as to why the Gemara did not expound the term for himself in the same fashion with to teach that a commoner is permitted to accumulate horses and wealth. That was the question. Here's the answer that I couldn't remember. One may answer that since the I remember now. Prohibitions only apply to horses and wealth. Okay, so we have to come to something else. So one explanation about the we did touch on it. One explanation is that we said was, how does he get the money, the king? By raising taxes. Yeah. Well, a commoner can't raise taxes. So the argument would be that it can't be that a head yacht and a commoner is allowed to acquire for himself loads of horses and lots of money if what we mean by that is that the king can't increase taxes in order to accumulate the wealth. Remember, we said that that he's allowed, according to this, he's allowed to take gifts and he's allowed to get money from elsewhere, from booty, but not by raising taxes. We couldn't use that explanation about it meaning a commoner because a commoner does not have the ability to raise their tax. And so therefore it wouldn't make sense. And so that was a good answer. I think a good answer to a good question. Okay, is that understood?
Yep.
Right. Okay. I want to just start the next bit. We're almost out of time, but I just want to start the next bit so that we can think about it, because I do want to show you this little bit of mathematics. Rav Yehuda Rami. Rav Yehuda asked a question. So the Gemara is now going off at a bit of a tangent because we have just been speaking about a king and the halachot of the king, who is not allowed to do what? Not allowed to have a lot of horses, not allowed to have a lot of money, and not allowed to have a lot of wives. So now we're going to talk about a king who did just that, which is Shlomo HaMelech. We're going to go off to talk about Shlomo HaMelech a bit because of the parasha that we've just spoken about. So Rav Yehuda Rav Yehuda, whilst he's thinking about this, says, hang on a minute, I've got a question. We have a pasuk in Malachim Aleph over there that says, Vayehi lishlomo arba'im elef urot susim lemerkavo. He had 40,000 urot, stables, stalls, whatever. 40,000 he had for his horses. That's a lot, right? Yeah, everybody agree 40,000 horses, that's a lot. He's not allowed to have a lot of horses, but he's got. He also had Shnei Masa Elef Parashim. He had 12,000 horsemen. Now, 40,000 urot of horses. Michael, where am I going to take you next?
Divrei Yamim.
Correct. Divrei Hayamim says something different. Divrei Hayamim says, Vayehi lishlomo arba'at alafim uriot susim. He had 4,000. What did I just say from Malachim Aleph?
40,000.
So why is Divrei Hayamim coming and telling me 4,000? Can't both be right, can they? What's the answer?
Divrei Yamim normally deals with facts, whereas the Torah deals with something not quite facts, just a large number.
Okay, very good. Michael is used to our Tanakh Shir by now, where we often go to Divrei Hayamim, where we see differences. And usually Divrei Hayamim is a factual account. That's what it is. It's chronicles, it's history. It's just telling you the facts. Whereas the Tanakh, when we're reading the story, it's got what? A narrative. It's got a narrative. So we're doing it again. Tanakh does it even. There's a narrative. Tanakh changes facts to suit the narrative, exactly as we've said earlier on today. So we should not be the mere fact that things are spun in a modern, to use a modern expression, because we all do it, even Tanakh does it. Now, I'm going to show you the Gemara now, and we'll finish on this, because that is Rabbi Yehuda's question I've just showed you. It's written in Kings, they had 40,000, and then it's written by and in Divrei Hayamim, it's written 4,000. Haketzad, how does that work? Answers the Gemara, and you're going to love this. Im arba'im elef. If, when it said it was 40,000, it's stablaot. What word can you say in the middle of that? It's stablaot.
Stables.
Stables. How do you say, what's the root of the word stable? Where's it? Which language is it from?
Let's have a look.
It's Latin. Latin. Okay. English says stable. Latin says establo. How do you say a stable in Hebrew? Here, it's stablot, like the Latin. How do you say what do you call the place where people play football and people go to watch it?
Stadium.
A stadium. How do you call that in Hebrew?
It's stadion.
It's stadion. Same thing. Yeah, it's stadion, which comes from the Latin. So it's is added on. It makes it easy for us to know. You want to know what this word stablaot means? Take off the it's, you've got stable, stables. So he says, if there were 40,000 stables, kol echad va'echad hayubo arba'at alafim urvot. If there were 40,000, then each one of them had 4,000 individual stalls, right, for the horses. Ve'im arba'at alafim. And if we go according to Divrei Hayamim and say there were 4,000 stables, then each one had arba'im elef. Each one had 40,000 stalls. So either way, you get to a situation where you have, let me see if I can share. Can you see my calculator there on the screen? Yeah?
Yep.
So if we say we go by kings, we've got 40,000. No, sorry, start again. We've got 40,000 stables and we've got 4,000 stalls in each one, which gives us a total of 160 million horses, right?
Really rich.
Okay. Now, if we go by Divrei Hayamim, we've got 4,000 stables, but we've got 40,000 horses in each one. The same figure, 160 million. So that's how we deal with the difference between Kings and Chronicles, right? They both come out to the same number. Now then, how many horses are there in the world at the moment? There is my question to ChatGPT. I can't guarantee it's true, but I wasn't going searching because by this time it was 10 past 10 and I was about to start the shear. I asked it, how many horses are there in existence in the world today? And he comes up with the best answer he can is roughly 50 to 65 million horses in the world today. According to the Gemara, Shlomo HaMelech had 3 times, approximately, 3 times the number of horses that exist in the world today. 160 million horses. I think I can say I rest my case.
I would say that it's not stables. They should be talking really about stalls rather than stables.
Yeah, well, that's what he says. The 140, the 40,000 were the stables, and inside each stable had 4,000 stalls.
I'm going the other way. I'm talking about Divrei Yamim. That is really talking about stalls in Divrei Yamim. And if that was talking about stalls, then it'd only be 4,000.
Well, that may well be, but that's not what the Gemara says. So
Johnny?
we go back. One second, Sharon. I'll come to you in a sec. So the Gemara, this Gemara clearly tells us that Shlomo has, or at least it didn't even, it doesn't say he had it. He had space for 160 million horses. I rest my case. Yes, Sharon.
This is a question that comes from utter ignorance. You know, all throughout the Tanakh, and now obviously here in Gemara also, we have this conversation about the accuracy of numbers. I mean, Sarah lives until 127, and we know that the 7 mean fulfillment and all of that. But is there any archaeological understanding of how the ancients were counting things or what it meant? I mean, obviously they weren't on the decimal system. Something just doesn't fit in. Has anybody gone through all the numberings and tried to rationalize an understanding of how the ancients actually measured height, width, age, and so forth?
Yes.
There is. And
yes.
is it credible, or is it, based on somebody's desire to come to a religious concept about it?
It is brilliant. Can you see my screen?
Then I can't see you. Just a minute. Yes.
This is a book called Ani Ma'amin by a man called Rabbi Joshua Berman. My very good friend David Marks bought this book for me, and it is absolutely brilliant all the way through. It's hard work, I warn you. It needs reading very slowly and several times because the man's a genius. He has a full chapter about exactly this topic, which I could not, without rereading it again, even summarize, because it's complicated. But he goes into it in very great detail, from a what's the word? Not scientific, but an academic, in an academic approach. He's a proper academic with academic qualifications and many publications to his name, peer reviewed. And in this book, Ani Ma'amim, I recommend it to all of you. He has exactly what you've asked for, Sharon. So I have a copy. I need to read it many times again before I fully get it. But it's a great book. It's available from all good Jewish bookstores and Amazon, and I recommend it to you. And I'm not on commission, and we're well out of time. Can
I just make a point, Johnny, before you go?
Yes.
Sorry. In the Haftorah for Shemini Atzeres, Solomon bought a peace offering of 22,000 cattle and 120,000 sheep to the temple. Impossible. Yeah,
I agree. I have always, spoken about these numbers, and it was a delight for me to read Rabbi Berman's book, because it's made me think that I'm not the only person that's thinking along these lines. The numbers are not to be taken literally. Now, if you were to say that in certain circles, you'd be told you're a heretic, which is what I've been told many times. But on this particular point, I'm willing to stand my ground. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. We're well out of time. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you all next week, and hopefully carry on where we left off.
Thank you very much.